Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Tea with the Druid. My name is Philip Cargom, and Tea with the Druid is brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Now, this episode is pre-recorded because I'm sitting on a boat somewhere at the time it goes out, but it's lovely to have you here watching this. And for our session today, I have a wonderful guest who I'm going to invite onto the stage immediately, Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, who is in Colorado. Rosemerry, it's lovely to see you there with that bright sunshine.
Thank you, Philip.
It's lovely to have you here, and I'll tell everybody how we got to meet, which was I came across Rosemary's poem "Because" a couple of months ago, and it just reflected how I was feeling and articulated in that wonderful way that poetry can do, where it kind of says it better than your own thoughts. And you get a kind of resonance with it, but also an expansioning and a deepening. And it really spoke to that sense of impotence that I think we all feel in the face of the tragedy that so many people have to suffer in the world, and all sorts of, particularly, the awful things that have been happening last year. And let's hope that in this coming year of 2025, things really do calm down and there's less suffering. But it spoke of that, and then reinforced that conviction that I think so many of us have inside, that all we can do is love, just love, love, love. Keep our hearts open, however much resistance we expressed. And tell me, Rosemerry, how did that poem arise in you? What was the inspiration for that poem?
Thank you, Philip. Well, first of all, I have to say it was lovely to hear you read it. I got to hear it newly when I heard you read it. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
One thing that I love about poems, and I think it's really at the heart of this poem, is that a poem longs to embrace opposition, right? A poem is open to, in fact, longs for paradox, because it's the truth of our lives, because it's true that at the same time, things are very difficult and the opportunity for joy, that our hearts are absolutely breaking and the world is so beautiful. And these things happen at the same time. That's certainly what I was feeling, when I was writing that poem, just as you so beautifully articulated, that it is love. It is love. It is love that is in every moment, helps us meet what is the most impossible thing to meet, the thing we think we can't say yes to. And yet there it is. And so how do we meet it? In the most vulnerable way, in the most open-hearted way, and bring our whole self to it, even if it's a very painful thing to do. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but
it's the way that speaks to you, and I think to so many of us. Yeah. And how did you become a poet? What made you become a poet?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I don't know how it works, but we can say this, that when I was a young girl, that I would read poems and loved them. I just fell in love with the music of them, the imagery of them. There was a Walter de la Mare poem about a snowflake that I remember watching the snow falling outside the window while I was sitting in school, and I was reading a poem about the snow, and there was the snow, and I had this. And it was full of beautiful words. It was pretty mellifluous. Before I melt, come look at me, this lovely icy filigree. I was like, filigree. I didn't even know what filigree meant. I just knew that filigree, I was full of filigree. So I think that there was a real pleasure in it. Also with Shel Silverstein's poems, which are for children, and they have such dark underbellies, and then they're also very fun and playful. And I think in this way, I fell in love with both the play of poetry, the music of poetry, and the way that it touches our world, helps us see this is what's happening, whether it's snowing or our heart is breaking. And poems help touch that and open to that.
They help to kind of mature us in a way. This is the word that comes to me. It seems poetry to kind of help us grow and ripen as human beings, as moral beings in the world somehow, don't they? Yeah,
That's a gorgeous word for it. I would have never thought of it, I don't think. Well,
yeah,
maybe eventually, but
yeah.
but but to say they mature us, I think is true, and maybe not just one poem, but a relationship with poetry over time, right? The way that to read Rainer Maria Rilke and to read, Pablo Neruda, and to read these, to read and to write, to sit down and say, how honest can I be about what's really here? And that kind of willingness to look at the self and to look at the world around us and see what is the relationship between these two. I feel like that willingness does invite a ripening. It does invite a maturity. It does invite I hesitate to say wisdom, but more just a willingness to show up.
And I think whilst you hesitate, I think wisdom is a good word, because it's something about the wisdom of the heart. We think of wisdom often as being a very cerebral kind of capacity, but there's this sort of wisdom of the heart. What poetry does is, because it's working with words, it is working with the mind, the wisdom of the mind, but it also touches the heart too, because of the paradox actually that it works with as well so often. So I think there's it's a fascinating process, and at the moment, Stephanie and I have 2 young grandchildren who are just mastering language. They're just in those early years, around 2 years old, and just starting to speak and so on, and seeing their joy in speaking words and the fun of gradually developing language really touches something so basic in us.
Yeah.
And
may we always have it, right? May we always be finding that joy.
And the other thing, as you were speaking, the other thing that occurred to me was around the similarity with psychotherapy and poetry, funnily enough, is it often strikes me that in psychotherapy, part of the work is just, it's about telling the truth. And you would say, well, that's pretty straightforward. You just turn up at the shrink's office, pay your money, and just tell the truth. Come on, what could be easier than that? But it's not easy, because we deceive ourselves and we don't know ourselves, and it takes a while for us to kind of uncover it. It's this sort of it seems an ongoing journey of sort of honesty with oneself and about oneself. And when you talked about writing poetry as a way of you actually saying, how honest can I be? And in that, of course, there's a tremendous vulnerability, because with honesty comes a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And when I just before this, we decided, recorded this, I just went and looked on your website, and I saw the poem that you had written for today, which is the 2nd of January, which is when we're recording this. Then it's going out about 3 weeks later on the 20th. And I was so moved by it, because you write about the loss of your son. And at the time you and I first made contact a couple of months back, I had, in one of those synchronistic ways, had a number of emails from mothers who had lost their sons, and they're talking about their responses to it and so on. And I wondered, and I've asked you before this recording, because it's a sensitive question, I asked you if you'd be prepared to read it out to us. And I think that, and you said you would, which is lovely, because I think that would introduce the listeners and viewers to your poetry and to your particular style of poetry in a very strong way. And would you like to share that with us now?
Thank you, Philip. So this is the poem I wrote last night. My practice is to write a poem every day, and usually at night. And the thing maybe to know is that it's steeped in the Odyssey, and there's a word in here that I had to look up how to pronounce it, Nepenthe, which is the drink that Helen of Troy gave to Telemachus when he visited, and it would help him forget his losses. This poem is called The Remembering. And if I should sit at the table with Helen of Troy, let me not sip from the drink she offers, the nepenthe that would make me forget sorrow. If I know anything now, it is that sorrow helps us grow. Not that I want sorrow, no. But neither do I want to forget my boy, and his story is knit with sorrow. I choose sorrow so I might continue to love. Imagine not saying his name when I walk alone beneath the stars. Imagine not weeping when I think of how he held me. Imagine not laughing when I think of how we played. Imagine not smiling when I hear myself saying words he would say. Imagine not learning how tenuous it is, this thread that ties us to life. How lovely and strong it is, this thread that ties us to each other, even after death. Let me not take Helen's cup. Let the beauty be not in forgetting our cares, but in sharing them. Connection, the most potent drug of all. In this epic, perhaps she will offer to listen to me, and I will listen to her.
I have a friend who is a priest in our local village, and he's a very radical priest, and he speaks Rumi poetry. He stands up, and instead of giving a sermon, he'll stand up and he puts his hand up and he reads a Rumi poem, and then he just allows the silence to drop in. And after that poem makes me want to drop into the silence for a long time. Thank you so much. It's very moving. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that central idea of remembering and not forgetting is so huge, isn't it? And again, it's like the injunctions to live in the now are really important, I think. And the whole mindfulness movement and all those exhortations to live in the now, very important, and there's a huge value in that. The only risk is that people forget that there's actually a value in remembering as well. If we all just lived in the now all the time, we'd actually be very stupid, I think. I mean, kind of spaced out and in the moment and all the rest of it. But you need to remember. And again, that interesting parallel connection between psychotherapy and poetry. A lot of psychotherapy is about remembering. And
Philip, isn't this the paradox, right? To be in the present,
yeah,
and to not forget where we've come from, right? Not to forget everything that's made us, everything that's matured and ripened us, as you said, right? In the way that a peach remembers the sunshine and the soil and the rain, and that's all invested in that peach as it becomes increasingly peach, right? So how is it that in our remembering we become increasingly ourselves and bring this to this moment, right? How do we bring all of the self to this moment? It's through this remembering, not staying stuck in the past. No, not telling that story again and again, but to see how does it inform who we are now? What do I know now that I didn't know then? What did I know then that has something to teach me now? Just this relationship, a real relationship between the past and the present. And even, I suppose, our curiosity about the future, how do we shape what's going to happen? And so poems invite all of this. They invite that kind of wonder. They invite that kind of opening, that kind of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you wrote that poem last night, and that you have a practice of writing a poem every day, which is extraordinary. And I want to dive into that a bit, because when I put together the training program that we have through the Order of Bards, Ovites, and Druids, we have basically, like in each year of the training, there's kind of one lesson a week. I mean, in practice, people don't follow it one a week because that's too rigid. And in fact, most people take around 4 years to do the bardic training, but you'll have, you can do it in 1 year, but most people take around 3 or 4 years. And then there's some amazing emails we get from somebody who's taken 12 years, and everything's happened in the middle of it all, and the rest of it. And but one of the things I was in my mind when I put the training together was, in each lesson there's a poem. So even if you only read the poem in the lesson, forgetting everything else, that means in a year or two, whatever, you've read 52 poems. You've read around. How many people read 50 poems in a year? They don't. Or 2 years, whatever. So, but you're even more into this, and you're doing one a day, and actually writing it. And you've got an app that helps people to do that, I think. Is that right?
Well, it's true. It's called The Poetic Path. The app itself is called Ritual.
Yeah.
And then I have a program on the app called
Right.
The Poetic Path, in which I read a poem, and they're my poems that I'm reading, but they're curated. So it's not like the daily poem, which you could read on a blog. That's the other crazy thing. I don't just write them, but as you said, I put them into the world, these first drafts, every day. Crazy thing to do. But on the Poetic Path, what I do is I offer ideas for how you might. I read my poem, I talk a little bit about it and read it again, and then offer ideas for how you might write your own poem, think about, or so much of writing is not writing. I feel like I just want to honor that if you sit and consider these things, that can be as valuable as writing. For me, I need to actually, and I learn so much from the practice of writing itself and letting the poem know more than I do. And I'm always surprised by what shows up. If anything's wise, it's the poem, right? I don't think the wisdom comes from here. I think the wisdom comes from this dance of showing up and being curious. But but then to just say, okay, maybe I'll write, maybe I won't write, but I'll sit down and I'll really think about this. I'll really consider it. I'll have a conversation with someone else about this. Yeah.
That's great. Do you ever find that a poem just doesn't come?
Oh, sweet man. All the time, every day. How many poems don't show up? Many more than the ones that do. Of course they don't. All the time, all the time. And so here again, back to ripening, which I think is a beautiful theme. That sometimes I think to myself, oh, I'd really like to write a poem about this. For whatever reason, it doesn't happen. Oh, then then I write about something else. And this ripening does, over time, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's the next month or the next year. There's a poem in my new book about, the day that my son died, that I wrote many years after. And I couldn't have written that poem any sooner than I did. There was no way to touch it the way that I was. So sometimes a poem can give us this perspective. It allows us to be a witness of our own life, as opposed to just, I like to think of us as being the narrator of our own life and not just the hero. We get to be both in a poem, right? The one who's having an experience, but also the one who can see the experience, who can just zoom out or zoom in or tell it from a different perspective. And in this way, we stop believing the myth of our own story. And it opens it up. This is, I think, important then when we were talking about honesty earlier, to see that how honest can I be? Well, if we can say something true, then always the invitation to say the opposite and see, is that equally true? And to notice how many flavors of truth there are, and how all of them, the more of them we can write, we begin to circle, as Emily Dickinson says, my business is circumference. We begin to circle whatever is at the heart of these truths,
Mm.
which is more true than any one of them. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Yeah. No. How long ago did your son die?
That was in August of 2021, so about 3.5 years ago.
How old was he?
He was almost 17. It was just 2 weeks before his 17th birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And the mystery of loss and suffering and its relationship to beauty and joy is indeed one of the most profound ones, isn't it? I would say. I was listening to a chap called Ben Goldsmith, who's written a book, something like it's got the word octopus in it. I can't remember, but he's an incredible ecologist, and he lost his daughter, who was I think 15, and he gave this incredibly moving talk, and he talked about he had a pond in his garden, and he said he was so devastated that just every day he would walk down to this pond and take his clothes off and jump in to the icy water and crouch into a fetal position and then drop down. And then he would, slowly rise back up to the surface. And he said, sometimes I was like a madman. I would do it 5, 6 times a day. And he said, but sometimes he would come up to the surface and he would break the surface of the water and the sun would be shining, and and there would be such joy and such beauty in the world. He had these transcendent experiences, even in the depths of his despair and all the rest of it. And very, very powerful.
It's a beautiful story, and just thinking of that submersion, just thinking of the rituals that we so naturally find for ourselves that help us find a way forward, right? To go to a pond and to literally become naked, to strip as much away as we can. I think of the way that the cold strips away even more. How we gasp in that moment, how it literally forces this breath into us. I think that's beautiful, and here it is, just like you say. How is it that beauty and grief are so entwined? If we're open to that, and I understand that sometimes we can't be. I understand that, but I also know how that saved me day after day, or even minute by minute. Right after my son died, how something would happen. That day he died, how a firefly lit up right in front of my face, just at the moment that my friend said, "He has given you his love light to carry." The words I'd like to give everyone who's lost someone they love, that they've given you their love light to carry. But that beautiful moment of just that little light, and I mean, I laughed with it. And it was just this joy. It was this spark of joy and astonishment that happened in the most difficult of moments. And I think this is always available to us, whether or not we're able to meet it.
Yeah.
But the more naked we are, I think the more able we are in some ways to meet it.
Yeah. Well, Rosemerry, let's go into a meditation now, and let's have a really good long chat sometime on the Druid hearth. But now feels a good time, and I'll put links for people to find your work on the notes for this episode. But let's drop into a meditation now. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Druid way of doing these things, in our meditations, there are all sorts of different meditations that we do, but there's a kind of basic format to them of really connecting with the natural world. Excuse me. And then in the central section, we do different things in Druid. When we meet together in the forest, for real, as it were, in the physical world, we might have an initiation ceremony in the middle, or a wedding ceremony, or baby naming or blessing, or a seasonal ceremony to welcome the solstice or the equinox or whatever. Or we might have what's called an Eisteddfod, which is a festival of the arts in some way. And that sometimes we have quite long ones, which will go on for hours with people telling stories and singing songs and all the rest. Sometimes it can be really brief. And so in this meditation, we're going to have an Eisteddfod section where Rosemerry will read another one of her poems, which she wrote the day before yesterday. And although by the 20th of January, when you're watching this, the new year has already begun, we're still within the sort of range of looking back and sensing the old year and so on. So I think it's going to work for us as well. So let's, if what I'll do, Rosemerry, is I'll let you down. Well, I'll bring you back, but just so you don't have to sit there. So here we go. So let's just take a moment, and you might like to just reassure yourself that you're in the physical world and you can see the screen in front of you and the walls around you, ceiling above you, floor beneath you, and all that stuff. And then if you'd like to soften your gaze or close your eyes, ask yourself where you are. Well, of course, you're still in your room. And yet, there's a way in which we can be playful with our imaginations and start to imagine that perhaps the walls just gently dissolving, the ceiling and the floor dissolving, as we find ourselves in a sacred grove, in a clearing in the woods, this place beloved of the Druids, which signifies a place set apart, an open space, and yet protected and surrounded by nature, by the forest. And there are a number of us gathered here, people of like mind from all four corners of the earth who've come together in this circle to be here together now. You might be able to smell the wood smoke, see the small fire burning in the center of our circle, and to become aware of the earth beneath us. And you might like to take in a slow, deep breath, hold for a moment, and then breathe out fully and deeply, just relaxing into a sense of being seated here on the earth. One more time, breathing in slowly, holding for a moment, and then breathing out fully. And sensing the energy of the earth and the nice slow energy of the earth that brings us a sense of grounding, stability, and of healing. And you might like to sense the roots of the trees in the earth. You sense how the trees around us are rooted deep in the earth, and the roots are all connecting with each other. There's this great community of life beneath us, of the mycelium, all the roots sharing nutrients, all this life beneath us. And you can sense how the moisture in the soil is being drawn up into these roots, up into the trunks of the trees. And as you sense this energy flowing upwards, you become aware of the trees around you. You sense their presence and their power, the way they are rooted so firmly in the earth. Dear trees, we thank you for your presence, for your blessings, for your gifts. And we breathe in the essential oils of the trees, the oxygen that they give us. Deepening that sense of connection to the natural world, that stability, sense of groundedness and connection, but also opening us to their boughs and branches, the leaves and needles above us, and the sky above us. And you breathe in the energy of the sky now, feeling its crisp, clear energy flowing into you. And the energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the center of your being. You become aware of the circle now and the sense of community and connection. All of us seated together in the circle. Fire burning. A deep peace. And now for our Eisteddfod section. Our bard, our guest bard, Rosemerry, steps forward into the circle to recite to us her poem.
At the bonfire on New Year's Eve. To the list of things I will likely forget, add the color of the sky tonight. As we stood around the bonfire, the way the deep blue gave way to a deeper blue, to a deeper blue, until it was blue no more. Every moment more lovely than the moment before. How many moments of wonder have I forgotten in just this past year? The forgetting makes them no less wondrous. In fact, as I stood at the bonfire, I was aware of all the wonder stored in this body. How it has shaped me, created me, as much as any food I've eaten, as much as every walk I've taken, as much as any vitamin. And so I gathered it in me, the vision of sparks against the clear night sky, and Venus perched atop the barren tree, the heat of the flames, the crackle of trapped moisture turning to steam. There will be times this next year when I desperately need wonder. Though I will likely forget the particulars of this night, let me not forget how to be stirred by beauty, remade by it even. So I practice now this art of falling in love with the world. Come tomorrow, I will practice again.
And sitting in silence together, we feel the trees around us, the presence of us all together here in this circle. And you just imagine now that your hands are drifting out to either side of you, and you're taking hold of the hand to either side of you, feeling unique as an individual, and yet at the same time one whole person feeling at one with everyone in this circle. May this sense of peace, of love, of community that pervades this circle gently ripple out. May peace prevail on earth. May all life be blessed. May the land be blessed. May the earth be blessed. gently squeeze the hand to either side of you. You sense your hands drifting down so that your palms are lying on the earth. You feel the earth beneath you. And then you let your palms drift up to your heart. And you might like to do this physically too. You feel the warmth from your hands flowing into your heart. And as you do this, you feel this warmth pervading your body, and your sense of the body grows stronger as gradually your sense of being in the sacred grove begins to fade. As you become aware of being fully present in your body, here and now. The four walls around you, the ceiling above you, and the floor beneath you. And in your own time, and when you feel ready, you gently stretch your fingers and toes. And when you feel ready, you open your eyes. So Rosemerry, thank you so much. Thank you so much for reading the poem in R.I. Stedford. And I really hope that one day we'll be sitting around with a whole group of us around the fire, and you'll be reciting some of your poetry to us, whether that's in America or in Britain or maybe in France or somewhere else. Who knows where it will be, but I really hope it'll be one day soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for bringing me into the sacred grove. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, and thank you everybody for being with us, and much love and many blessings to everybody, and see you all in a week's time. So bye everybody. Bye.